I am so conservative.
Rationalize in my head. These are things I read in the
I'm going to talk about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had invited.
Remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah.
I am so conservative. If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative. I am so conservative. Welcome to the Unknown Webcast. This is a safety warning for those viewers who may be new to our program and not aware that I really am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving. In addition, I am truly theologically conservative. However, I want to know and believe what is true, and I'm willing to test my beliefs and change my mind if I find they are false. However, for those who are new to this and have a fear of hearing an idea which may actually lead them to thinking, this is not a safe space for you. Today is October 27, 2020, and broadcast number 212. Our friend, associate, and former professional astrologer, New Ager, Marcia Montenegro, is joining us to talk about that uncontroversial topic, a second look.
Nothing to see here, folks. Nothing
to see here, folks, on today's Unknown Webcast. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast, and our senior researcher, co-host, and resident former COVID-19 tracker, but occasionally revisiting it, I noticed.
Occasionally revisit.
Yes, Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie, baby.
Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm trees came out, saw their shadows, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our what do you call it? Our sponsors for the webcast today include the Coexist Boutique, for when you care enough to take your hands off your loved ones' throats long enough to pick out the perfect gift. The Coexist Boutique. And My Bible, guaranteed the most comfortable Bible you'll ever own. My Bible. Hold on a second. How did I do this? I don't know. I have an extra thing in here. So, to ensure continued access to this program, if you enjoy it, please go to midwestoutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. And because of our special guest, Marcia Montenegro, we have our legal disclaimer that we introduced in a previous episode, which I will read to you for legal purposes. Marcia Montenegro, founder of Christian Answers for the New Age, has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the Webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. The satirical content includes any and all commercials and credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall into the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content. This is from our lawyers at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. So we just want to make sure everybody knows Marcia is not on board with this stuff we do here.
Right. I'm on board with some of it. I'm on board with some of it.
Oh, some of it. Okay.
Well, some of it is really funny, Ron. You can be really funny. So
I can't. Yeah, I have that capacity.
He does, but I have to tell you, aren't everything. Oh gosh. I told several today that I've talked to. They said, "What are you doing today?" I said, "Well, we're doing that uncontroversial topic, Halloween."
Halloween.
Yes, and I have my armor-plated wear for those who are going to come out and assault me after we're done. I'm sure that'll happen.
I mean, there's so much. I don't know. It's like I don't think of I don't think I received the best education in the world going to a public school. It was an okay education. I mean, I had some really good teachers, and then I had some that were just okay. But there were a couple of things I did learn, and I don't think it was just because of I grew up in the Catholic Church or something. But take the word Xmas, okay? The way we stylize the word Christmas as Xmas. Of course, I guess I would assume all of us here know that the X is really represents the Greek letter chi, or it's pronounced ki, or some people say chi, which is the first Greek letter in the word Christos, which means Christ. And so really it's an abbreviation. It's the kind of abbreviation that is actually common in ancient manuscripts, including manuscripts of the New Testament, where they would abbreviate a lot of words that just happen so frequently. It was just easier to abbreviate them. Usually when they abbreviated Christ, it was chi rho, with the two letters, with a line. You know how we put a period after an abbreviation? They would put a line over the abbreviation to signify it. And what we kind of brought that into English, becomes Xmas, but so many people say you're taking Christ out of Christmas, when actually it's just another way of keeping him in Christmas with a 280 character limit on Twitter. So,
I
it's
like
like,
that. That's a long way to get to Twitter, which we are having a problem with.
it's like so many. And now you also have Halloween, and in my particular corner of the Reformed evangelical universe, there are people who believe that all holidays are wrong. I mean, Christmas, Easter, anything other than the Lord's Day, Sunday, is wrong. It's evil. So I have to contend with that every once in a while. How dare you have a Christmas Eve celebration in your church? How dare you even mention Easter on Easter Sunday? So believe it or not, it happens.
So here's a point that you're making that I think is important. We don't have uniformity across the Christian world on these issues.
Right.
We have diversity, and that is allowable. One of the points that brings me to wanting to do this again, we did this last year with Marcia. This one is certainly going to be different just because we never know what we're going to do next anyway. So it's not ever planned. And that is this. As I thought about this coming into this week, I went back to the year 1993. I know that's ancient history for many, whose history only started about 18 minutes ago. But in 1993, I went to the Parliament of the World's Religions with there was about a dozen of us there. And we spent several hours with the PR person for the Covenant of the Goddess. His name is Donald Frew. Really like Donald Frew. He had no experience with churches, didn't grow up in church. His only experience with Christianity was Mike Warnke's book, Satan's Cellar.
Okay.
And Christians who had read the Satan's Cellar and all of a sudden knew all things about witchcraft, Satanist, paganism, etc., as told by the reputable, ever-present Mike Warnke, who, as it turns out, was
basically made it all up.
He made it all up.
Can I give a little anecdote about that book?
Yes,
absolutely.
I picked up that book as a brand new Christian. I had been a Christian for just a few months. I saw the book in a grocery store. It was one of those racks that actually have mostly Christian books. I think they're actually sponsored by a Mennonite group. And I saw the Satan's Cellar and it caught my attention. So I picked it up. I didn't know who Mike Warnke was. I'd never heard of him. And I started looking through it and reading parts of it here and there. And I thought, this is fake. This is not, this does not ring true at all. I don't think he really knows what Satanism is. And, even though I was not involved in Satanism, right, I knew some things about it. And I actually had known a couple people who were sort of covert Satanists. And I put the book back. And I thought, I don't know. I don't know about that book. Well, later I discovered that it had been it was exposed, or maybe it was exposed later. And I think it was exposed later that, he was basically making most of it up. And he had not done the things he claimed to do. So I always
Right.
feel like, well, good, good that I was able to tell that by looking at the book. But, a lot of people were deceived.
Right. Mike Kurtenstein, who was with Jesus People USA, and I forget the other author,
John Trott.
John Trott,
Yeah.
had done research actually to prove Mike Warnke was telling the truth, came to the realization that it was all completely invented, and did a book called Selling Satan, which is very well done, actually, so exposing it. So what I came to realize in that meeting, because at the end of our discussion, after he explained, okay, here's what Wicca is, here's what we believe, here's what we do, and we got firsthand knowledge of that, he made this amazing statement. He said, if I thought being Christians is what you guys were, and there were, like I said, in that room, there were probably 6 or 8 of us talking, all evangelical, missionaries to cults and non-Christian religions. He said, if I thought being a Christian is what you guys were, I would do it in a minute. I don't believe it. I think you're an anomaly. Because in his experience, Christians misrepresent what non-Christians believe.
Yeah.
We shouldn't do that. Even with Halloween, we shouldn't do that.
Right.
Yeah, it's really disturbing how much, not only do we have people who make statements in literally every area of life, okay, politics, religion, you name it, science, they make wild statements. But then you have this group that is kind of become a creation of the web, known as the fact checkers. And after, at first I was kind of grateful that these people existed, until I realized that depending on what they were checking, sometimes they could be as far off as the people they were checking. In other words, they all brought biases. When I was working on my master's thesis, I presented my first draft to my advisor, Dr. Walter Elwell. For those of you who that might not ring an immediate bell, he is the editor of the Evangelical Dictionary of Theology and the Evangelical Dictionary of Biblical Theology. So if you buy either of those two, he's the editor, now retired. I submitted my thesis, my first draft, to him, and he said, I'm just really grateful for the way you footnoted everything. Here's a guy who was like, he goes way back and back to near the beginning of the Evangelical Theological Society. Okay, he is very well versed in. I mean, he knows these guys. I could name names of prominent theologians, and he knows them like friends.
Okay, but he wasn't like friends with Moses directly.
Probably not. Probably doesn't go back that far. So, and he said, it's just amazing, even in the theological world, even in academia, how people don't footnote enough. He said, He complimented me on how much I footnote, and he said footnote everything. He says, I've seen people make the wildest statements with no footnotes. Even if you footnote it, you might not be right, but people can at least check your source to see if you are. So footnote everything. And nobody footnotes, nobody makes any reference. People just make these statements, and it's clear they haven't read any of the original sources. They have not done any real research other than passing along a meme or something. And so somehow this is going to get us over to the subject of Halloween.
Yeah.
I wonder how many Halloween memes there are out there that make these wild claims about it.
Well, I think one of the problems is that even people in the pagan community, the non-Christian community of pagans, neo-pagans, witches, have the wrong information. They themselves believe some of the myths about Halloween because, well, in particular witches, most of them think witchcraft is an ancient religion. Right. And they make a lot of claims that are historical claims that are false. Right. And this started with Gerald Gardner, who started Wicca in the United Kingdom, and he was basing a lot of his statements and claims on a book by it was that archaeologist. Was it Margaret Murray? I think it was Margaret Murray. Jones? No, I think it was not Indiana Jones. It was Margaret Murray, who was an Egyptologist, and she wrote a book about witchcraft, and later it was completely debunked. she was not able to historically support a lot of her statements about ancient witchcraft religion. And Gardner based a lot of his teachings and ideas on that. And that has continued to this day. And so a lot of people in the Wiccan and pagan community actually don't even know the history behind some things. So I wanted to make that point because unfortunately, a lot of Christians, if someone was, as a Christian and was formerly a Wiccan or a witch or something, they will believe what they say just because they were a witch. Well, you were a witch, so you must know about the history of Halloween. Well, no, not really. So I find that this just increases the problem. And I have changed my article on Halloween several times, and I'm about to change it again. In fact, I just sent a change to my webmaster like 2 weeks ago, and I'm about to change something else there at the beginning because I don't like the way it's worded. I have changed because I have, since I've become a Christian, done more, looking into Halloween. Originally, I believed all the stuff I was hearing from Christians. But as I examined it, I came to find that actually the history is very, very, very murky. Most of it is unknown, and there is conflicting information, very conflicting. Some say trick or treat just began in the United States, I think in the 40s, maybe. Others say Irish immigrants brought it over. Others say, it's a pagan practice where they went around to placate the dead who were wandering, so they had to leave out food for them. So it's kind of this melange of different so-called backgrounds that are not really clearly verified in any source. And so you have this big question mark about it. And so I think when the history is so murky, you have to think about what is it to most people in the culture here in the United States? It's a day to get candy or a day to dress up and go to a costume party. Right. So it's really a very commercial, it's mainly a commercial holiday in this country. There are, yes, I know the pagans and Wiccans, it's a special day, one of their 8 special days, Samhain. And they do rituals and they do it on the other 7 holidays as well. There are other 7 days. So it's one of their 8 days that they see special. But unless you're joining them in a pagan ceremony, you're not doing anything pagan by giving out candy.
Another thing is what I discovered. I worked a while ago, like 30 years ago, and I can't believe it. Over 25 years ago, I worked in a seminary where 20% of the students were Hispanic. And one year I was kind of caught by surprise. We didn't really have that many students from Mexico. But in Mexico, there's this celebration known as the Day of the Dead. And when some of the Hispanic students saw for the first time how Halloween, when they came up from their country to study, they saw how Halloween was celebrated. It reminded them, they saw the jack-o'-lanterns and the witches and the goblins and all that kind of stuff. It was very offensive to them because it reminded them of this Day of the Dead. But when I studied the Day of the Dead, it was like, wow, this is really different from Halloween. First of all, it's not celebrated on October 31st. It's celebrated on November 1st and 2nd. I think sunset November 1st to sunset November 2nd, something like that. It's not really connected to the whole ghouls and goblins thing. It's more connected to, kind of praying for your dead ancestors. There are questions and controversies regarding its origin as well. Did it originate as like an Aztec pagan holiday that was somehow Catholicized, or was it something just unique to Mexican Christian culture, Catholic culture? All these things, and yet they come here, they see these superficial resemblances, and one of the families on campus started spreading tracts against Halloween based on the connection to the Day of the Dead. And we were like, no, that's not what this is about. Sorry. So, but that's we are now the United States, I don't know if you're aware of this, is the largest Spanish-speaking nation in the world. We have more Spanish speakers, first generation even, than any other Spanish-speaking country because of just how many people we have.
Right. Well, yeah, we have a large population. So,
Yeah.
Marcia, we have a question from Les Generous. Do you think Native American shaman and other occultic people are really capable of calling up spirits?
Okay. No, I do not think anybody is capable. Well, they're capable of calling up spirits, but not dead people. If that's I'm not
Right.
sure what the person means, dead people or just spirits in general. If they're calling up spirits and they're, this is an occult practice. Of course, they see it as, more in the context of their culture and their religion. And so whatever that may be, whatever you're calling up, if you're trying to call up a disembodied being, yeah, you might get a response, So in fact, that's why I warn against certain things like doing the Ouija board or going to consult a medium, who claims to contact the dead, because somebody may show up, but it's not going to be anybody from God,
Right.
It's not going to be anybody who really wants to help you. So yeah, I think they're capable of calling up spirits, but not dead, not ancestors or dead people, which is the case in some cultures.
Well, and that's an important thing. It is, you and I have worked on the book on the Enneagram, Richard Rohr and the Enneagram Secret, and we are aware that the story for Oscar Achazo is that he communicated with two angels, two spirits.
Right.
Now, they would be demons. They would be evil spirits, not departed spirits of departed people or angels even. They're with fallen angels. Claudio Naranjo did automatic writing. So he was channeling a spirit of some sort, not a good spirit.
Right.
The current hashtag BLM, and we did an article on this a few weeks ago, before they start each of their protests, calls out the names of the spirits of those who have died prematurely, in their opinion, had their lives, they say, stolen from them, so that these spirits can come and indwell them and empower them to carry on the work they need to do. These would be not the spirits of the departed dead, but demons.
Right. And there are a lot of religions, a lot of the indigenous religions have that kind of view. That's very common. That's true in voodoo and something called Palo Mayombe or something. I may not be saying it right. In South America, there are these religions where you call upon these spirits, and they're either gods or they may be dead ancestors or some kind of spirit, and they actually possess you. And but that's considered something sacred, and that's considered in their view good. So there's a lot of ideas of spirit contact in a lot of different religions around the world, a lot of pagan religions, and then in occult practices like a medium or people who try to get their spirit guides. I had spirit guides, so I know it's a very real thing. So of course one does not want to go there, I wanted to say a couple more things about Halloween. I want to make my position clear. I am not endorsing the glorification of anything dark, or I am not for putting. I don't think it's a sin to do it, but I would not want to put a skeleton, out in the yard or dress up as a witch or something like that, And I would think most Christian parents, even if they allow their children to trick or treat, they would not have them dress up in those outfits. So, you could, there are plenty of other things you can dress up as that are more innocent. Yeah. And so I don't endorse the part of Halloween where some people really take it to the dark side and glorify scary things and stuff like that. I'm not for that. But I think you can celebrate it or observe it in an innocent manner. And I don't think that it's wrong because, as I pointed out in my last post on Halloween that I did about a week ago, I said, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Every day is given to us by the Lord. October 31st is just another day created by the Lord. There's nothing inherently evil in that day just because it's Halloween or just because some pagans do rituals on it. And it's my birthday. And it's
Oh,
my
really?
birthday. So I just want to throw
Okay.
that in there. But that's not why I say that. I mean, of course, it's not why I
Isn't
say
that an odd coincidence that you were really into astrology and you were born on Halloween?
Yeah, a lot of people have remarked on that. When I was an astrologer, a lot of psychics and other people saw that as a kind of a sign that I
Sounds
had
like it.
probably had a history in my previous lives of
Aha.
being involved in astrology and other kinds of practices like that, because the fact I was born on Halloween in their eyes gave me some kind of status. And the fact my son was born on that day, and he actually, that was not his due date. He was 2 weeks early.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was very unexpected, believe me. And then a lot of people said, oh, well, you obviously are linked to him very strongly, and you probably had previous lives together. So a psychic told me that once. But this is a way of New Age thinking. This would be very common in the New Age to see things that way. So yeah, it worked for me as an astrologer, especially with my clients who were Wiccans and witches. And I had quite a few of them. Where in Atlanta, where I practiced astrology, there were a lot of neo-pagan groups there, and I knew several of them, and I was their astrologer. And so the fact I was born on Halloween always gave me kind of a special status to those who knew about it. And then after, Christ entered my life and saved me and redeemed me, it's now become kind of interesting when people know about it because of my ministry. And it's also become a way I can sometimes talk to non-Christians if they know it's my birthday and then they say something about Halloween, something that has to do with an occult connection. Then I can bring up the fact, well, yeah, I used to be an astrologer, and then I can explain why I'm not. So it also gives me an opportunity as a Christian to talk to people. So it's kind of funny how it was used in one way when I was an astrologer, and it's being used in another way.
God used it in a different way. Yeah.
I got hit by a car in a previous life, but my insurance company refused to pay because they said it was a pre-existing condition. So John wasn't listening.
It is time. It is. I was just ignoring you this time. I told someone this morning I know someone who's a professional astrologer, a medium of sorts, but I only know her medium well. So.
No. Oh, God. That is so overused, that medium.
When I was a kid, now this goes back to the 60s now, I remember a few kids dressing up like a witch or like a Frankenstein. It was kind of expensive. I mean, not everybody had the money to really do it up. You went to, remember Osco Drug? Do they still have that, Don?
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think that was where you got your costumes. They didn't have special Halloween stores back then. You went to a drugstore like Walgreens or Osco, and you bought your Halloween costumes, and they were just really simple. I mean, Superman was a popular one. Being an astronaut, that was popular back in the 60s. A lot of kids would just dress up like a hobo. Well, what did you have to do to that? Your mom would break out her makeup kit and make you look all scruffy. And, and so it hardly ever was it associated, except with the decorations that people put out. Hardly ever was it associated with things
evil spirits,
would be associated with the occult.
So that brings me to our satirical break here, which I don't know what we're doing because you didn't give me an order. So
sorry. Well, I can't
do a good setup here.
Well, we have, it is the whole program is a setup for this one. It's a segue. Yeah. So the question is, do you struggle with finding the right wine to bring to pagan goat sacrifices? Do you wonder what to wear at your neighbor's neo-Nazi parties? Do you get anxiety attacks when trying to find the right picket sign to share with your friends from Westboro Baptist Church? Well, now you can put an end to all the worries that come from trying to fit in with people on opposing sides of the culture wars, because you can find the perfect gift for any ideology at the Coexist Boutique. This week's special deal, which has been really the special deal of every week we've run this commercial, in honor of the 50th anniversary of Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution, relive those days when university students subjected their professors to public shaming sessions in which they would break their eyeglasses and publicly rebuke them at great length for not exhibiting politically correct opinions and behaviors. Oh, wait, that's going on right now in the USA. What I'm talking about here is Cultural Revolution eyewear, genuine smashed Chinese prescription lenses and frames formerly owned by PhDs and university administrators. You'll just have to take our word for it that that's where they came from. These are dating back from 1966 to 1976 and are only 99 cents a pair at the Coexist Boutique. For when you care enough to take your hands off your loved ones' throats long enough to pick out the perfect gift. The Coexist Boutique. I just coexist with everybody.
Yes, well, Ken Van has a couple of questions here. One is Halloween originated with a holy day in the Catholic calendar, referred to as the Holy Eve, as with Christmas, before All Saints' Day or All Souls' Day.
Well, as a Roman Catholic, I will insert a correction on that.
Okay.
Halloween was not the holy day. The next day, November 1st, it still is. It's a feast day on the Roman Catholic calendar. Usually it's called All Saints' Day.
Mhm.
So that is the actual feast day in Roman Catholicism. It's kind of like Christmas is also a feast day on the Roman Catholic calendar, but Christmas Eve is not. It's just the day before. So Halloween is simply the day before. It was called we got the name from
All Hallows Eve.
Yeah, All Hallow or Hallowed's Eve.
Yeah.
Hallow being the more Anglo-Saxon word for saint. So there you go.
Right.
So not something to celebrate,
right.
but not occultic either.
It's not occultic either, and it has, that's what happens is that you've got the Day of the Dead that Ron talked about at the beginning, and that gets conflated with Halloween, along with Saints' Day. And I wanted to say something. I think that, and I've discovered this not too long ago, that apparently Halloween was not seen as a evil day at all by Christians. Prior to the Satanic Panic of the 1980s, the Satanic Panic,
which is who? Going back to who? Going back to who is that?
Who's that?
Mike Warnke.
Oh, okay.
Mike Warnke, the Satanic Panic, really.
But he wasn't the only one, though. Yeah, Jack Chick promoting.
Yeah, and then there's Jack Chick.
He was promoting all these weirdos. Yeah.
The chick tracks, which I have seen on Halloween and the Occult, are horrible, full of misinformation. And they try to paint these, it's very sensational, And so the Satanic Panic, painted Halloween as evil. All of a sudden, anything that they thought was satanic was evil. And then Christians began to start being against Halloween. So my thing is, I think it's up to your conscience, but if you're going to object to it, or maybe not object to it, but not observe it because of your conscience, at least do it based on facts, not on myths, and on misunderstood information. So, yeah, it's fine with me if you don't feel like participating, but let it not be for the wrong reasons, and this is the point I try to get across, and people will still, make comments on my posts. Well, I object to it because I think it's an evil day, blah, blah, blah. And I've just made a whole post about.
There you go.
So somebody's calling. I've just made a whole post about how, a day cannot be evil. How can a day be evil? A day can't be evil. That's just, it's illogical. It's irrational. So I try to be really rational in what I write. And I try to show people, how Christians need to be rational, because reason and logic, as I always learned from Dr. Norman Geisler, is rooted in God's character. Mm-hmm. And so, logic is just part of how we're wired and how the world is wired. It's order. God is a God of order. So we should approach things rationally and not fall for these sensational things and not hype things up. That's one of my biggest concerns dealing with the occult, not just Halloween, but there's so many false rumors and false ideas out there that I'm constantly battling in my ministry. I mean, it's an ongoing, never-ending battle.
Speaking of rumors or things that may be true that we have to verify, or maybe we do know are true, Ken Van asked another question. It's been claimed that prior to pre-harvest Celtic celebration to scare evil spirits away, that would spoil the harvest. Hollowed out gourds with cameras lit to scare them away. Any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, my thoughts on that are I want some credible historical evidence for that. Because so far what I see are just claims and assertions. And let me put it this way, even if one of those things like the hollowed out gourd goes back to some kind of pagan ritual or belief, if you carve a pumpkin out with your children, you are not indulging in a pagan activity. Mm-hmm. Just because maybe, and who knows, pagans used it for a certain way, it doesn't mean that you are doing anything pagan by you are carving out a pumpkin to have fun with. Usually parents and children do it, or some people just do it because they like doing it. They're artistic. They come up with these really great expressions on the face of the pumpkin, and it's just a decoration. Nobody believes that the pumpkin is actually evil or an evil spirit or whatever. And so, Christians need. I really, really hope that Christians start. Not all of them, but the ones who go for these kind of sensational things will start really examining this again from a biblical viewpoint, which is that to participate in something evil, you have to really be doing an evil ritual, or you have to be doing something where you're violating one of God's commands. And he says, don't consult mediums, don't consult people who do divination. So he's very clear about that. So if you do that, then you're crossing a line. But carving a pumpkin is not an evil activity. Even no matter who did carve the pumpkin, hundreds of years ago, and I still don't know if that's really true. So that's the problem. There's really a twofold problem. One is the basis for some of these assertions about Halloween true, and the second one is, even if some of them are true, is doing them a sin, or is it wrong? So that's the second issue. So there's two issues with it.
Well, and I want to go back to something we started off the beginning with and expand a little bit. There is a great deal of diversity within the Christian faith around the world on any number of issues. I have friends who were born in other countries that are believers, but they don't celebrate birthdays because they celebrate something else. They celebrate something they call name day. Which is the point when they were baptized, they received their Christian name. So they don't celebrate birthdays, they celebrate name days instead. They don't understand the whole hoopla over birthday celebration one way or another. I have friends who are from India, for example, that don't celebrate Christmas. Christians, absolutely born again. They are grateful of the birth of our Lord, but again, they are concerned about some of the elements involved in the celebration of Christmas. I think, for conscience sake, that's fine.
Except that Christmas is not pagan. I have my Christmas is not pagan post every year, and it's now an article on my website. And I say the same thing there. If you don't want to observe Christmas, that is up to you, but don't not observe it because of wrong reasons, like Christmas is pagan, because it's not. And I have shown that at least the last 7 years, every year in a row, I have done my post. Same for Easter. And there's all this mistruth and lies that come out with it. And it just really, nothing makes me angrier than a deception. That makes me angrier than anything in the world.
I have a Sunday school class that I teach. Occasionally, I vary when I teach adult Sunday school, and when I get into the month of December, attendance kind of varies more because people travel a lot. And so I've created this class just on Christmas, the history of Christmas, it deals with questions like this. One of the common myths you hear is that Christmas is simply a Christian dressing up of the feast of Saturnalia.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lie. It
Right.
isn't, and I talk about that. One thing I was interested to discover was most Christians probably believe that Jesus was not born on December 25th, even though we have writings from the church fathers going back to late in that period, 5th century or so, that actually do identify that as the date.
Right.
But not only that, but there's a book by I passed away now. Harold Honer wrote a book called Chronological Aspects of the Life of Christ, and he would not say it was December 25th necessarily, but he answers all the arguments against Christ being born on a winter date, and pretty convincingly. In other words, he's basically saying, well, maybe he wasn't born in December, but he could have been. It's not something that is as ridiculous as some people make it sound. Right. So it could have happened, according to him.
Right, and there are reasons why the early church fathers came to those conclusions. In fact, some of the other holidays that are celebrated around that time came into existence, it seems like, after the Christians were already celebrating Christmas. So it wasn't even a syncretistic thing. Now, I have a question here from Richard Neal, which I want to put up here, and it's for Marcia mostly, but of course Ron can weigh in on it also. My question is the danger of horror movies during Halloween. I remember watching like Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, etc. as a kid. Modern horror movies seem more satanic, occultic now.
Yeah,
Marcia.
I agree that the movies that are now out are probably worse in nature and darker than in previous times. I did watch horror movies a lot before I was a Christian. Now, I don't think just watching a horror movie is a sin, but I don't think it's a wise thing to do, especially for some people who are very sensitive. Some people really, if they see something scary, it really bothers them for days, even weeks. I mean, I have a few friends like that. They just have very sensitive spirits or sensitive minds, and so they avoid things like that because it has a very bad effect on them. Some people get bad dreams. We don't want to see something that glorifies horror, but a lot of horror movies actually are where people are fighting evil. And where they're actually, they actually go after the evil guy, in the movie. Now, the problem with some horror movies, I think a definition of horror movie is that it has to include an element of the supernatural. So it sometimes may glorify supernatural activity, which is not good. And, that's a problem. So I guess my perspective on it is I don't endorse going to horror movies. I don't think they are generally a good idea. But I am not going to accuse a Christian who goes to a horror movie of committing a sin or telling them that they're doing something wrong. I think, again, that's a matter of conscience. Definitely a movie that would glorify something evil would not be good. If the movie is like making maybe a demon look good or having demonic powers look good, well, that's something I definitely am against. So I would be against that kind of thing.
We're kind of focused on Halloween, but I want to broaden it out just a little bit to ask the question, and maybe you want to weigh in on this. Does our media in some ways prepare us and our young people to embrace more false religious views like witchcraft, like Wicca, for example? I think of Bewitched. I loved Bewitched as a kid. It was just so fun. You have this witch who twinkles her nose and magical things happen. And she has a whole family of witches that just pop in and out of her life. And then later on, you have one of the advertisements for Denny's was Sabrina, Teen Witch. So you have kind of this introduction of witches in a normal, they're just normal people hanging around doing magical stuff. Does that sort of prepare our kids to embrace occultism?
Yeah, I think those kind of things desensitize children and as a whole desensitize the culture. And I think the examples you brought up, Bewitched and Sabrina, are probably more innocent examples because, you know, that's not how witches do spells. They don't wrinkle their nose or whatever.
Right.
Sabrina had a little more elements of witchcraft than Bewitched, which had very few. It's mostly like fantasy. But Sabrina, she actually had a book of spells. And so there was some more kind of real occult ideas in that program. And then apparently there's a current Sabrina that I watched the first maybe 3 episodes of. It's extremely dark, but interestingly enough, it presents witches as actually serving Satan. And I found that very interesting, but it's a very, very dark. I didn't watch past maybe the first 3 episodes, and I don't know what's happened in it. But I think what I've noticed is that it has gradually gotten darker. So
Right.
Things promoting occult ideas or occult practices have become darker and darker, you know, more further away from something like Bewitched.
Well,
And
they
more darker
it's
realm.
it's kind of like filmmakers and those who write the television series rise to the challenges trying to outdo previous
Yeah.
productions. And I also think, and you and I have talked about this. I haven't done this in a while. I used to have a group of churches that would bring me into Colorado to speak on worldviews, and I would spend 3 days speaking on worldviews, spend time with the kids who are getting ready to go off to college. And then at the end, we would watch a film, and because my main thesis is most of us get our worldview by osmosis. I think it just sort of filters into our brain from the resources we are in contact with, the television we watch, the movies we watch, the books we read, the people we hang around with, the magazines we're exposed to, the news that we watch, and we start believing things and we don't even really know where it came from. So when you watch a film or a series, to me, you got to ask the question, what worldview are they teaching? Because every one of them are teaching a worldview. It is not strictly entertainment. So the film I use is called Hidalgo, which is kind of, I think, an interesting film. It's a race across the desert. The main characters are an American Indian. Animism is his religion. You have a Muslim. And then you have a Christian group. At the end, I say, okay, now you have 3 religions represented here. What are they? And then they lay that out. I say, okay, which one is the villain? The Christians. They're the liars and the thieves and the ones you can't trust.
Mhm.
Which one is the most honorable? It is the Muslim. Which one is the correct one? It is the American Indian, the animism. And the Muslim is most honorable because he protected the Indian from the Christians and he acknowledged the superiority of his worldview in the film. So you just learned from the filmmakers what is the superior, and you didn't even realize it was happening. This kind of dark film does the same thing.
Star Wars teaches
Right. Taoism.
teaches Taoism and some Buddhist and occult concepts.
Right.
And yet that's a movie beloved by the Christian community to the extent that they will call themselves Jedi warriors and they talk about the Force. And I mean, I've just seen it all over especially, I guess, you know, people under my age category, because they're the ones who saw it mostly when they were younger. And I've seen a lot of that in the apologetics community. And so, you know, I'm telling you, I have definitely strong views. I have articles on Star Wars on my website because I saw the first 3 movies when I was in the New Age, and I recognized all the philosophies in it. And I thought it was great because those were my views.
Well, I mean, I was pretty young. Well, when the first Star Wars came out, I was a Christian, but I immediately realized that they were pushing a non-Christian worldview in the film. And the same thing happened when The Matrix came out. It's Gnosticism. Yeah. It's a Gnostic. It's a Neoplatonic / Gnostic worldview.
Yeah, it's very Buddhist.
Well, yeah, you can find analogies to that, but the filmmakers, they were brothers. I forget their names, but they actually openly admitted, yeah, they're very influenced by Gnosticism.
Yeah, they said
Zemeckis.
Buddhism. Ron, they said Buddhism too. I read an interview.
Oh, really?
They
Okay.
said- They may have said Gnosticism as well, but they specifically mentioned Buddhism, which is something I already noticed when I saw the first Matrix film.
So in any case, I think as long as you go into it knowledgeably, as long as you, I think it can actually be a teaching tool where you,
Yeah.
where you, as a Christian, you say, okay, here are some of the elements of this particular worldview. Now let's watch the movie, and now let's comment on it. I think a lot of movies are great for that, like 2001: A Space Odyssey. What is the worldview being taught there? Well, Arthur C. Clarke, it took him years before he would explain the ending of 2001. It's a very strange ending. A lot of people speculated, what does he mean by this? What's going on here? And Clarke waited until just before the sequel was released in the 2010, which was released in the 80s. And he said, here's the point of the ending of the first movie. The point is that if we ever encounter a race of beings that is capable of interstellar travel, they will be so advanced, so superior to us, so far ahead of us, that the very encounter with them will be something we can't even explain. And my thought was, you mean like God? You mean like how God said to Moses, you cannot see my glory because it'll kill you? You can't, like God, who is incomprehensible beyond our, we can't fit him into our minds. And what they've done is they've replaced, what Clarke did was he replaced the God of the Bible with aliens.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's and aliens and the idea of these advanced civilizations out there is very big in the new. Well, it's not all New Agers are interested in that, but in the New Age, you do find that view. It's very common that they're these superior beings that we're going to learn from, and people who claim they've gone to other planets or been abducted often say, these were such superior beings, and they don't understand why we're fighting and why we don't have peace on Earth. Because of course, these superior people always, or aliens are always for peace and world peace, et cetera, and they're very spiritual.
And they're against global warming. Also, I noticed that.
Probably. And
they'll destroy your race if you destroy your whole planet if you don't save it. So.
yeah, they say, well, we've got to do something because we're destroying the planet. That's a very common message from the aliens. So, but
and it amazes me, all the aliens that travel across and abduct people and do experiments, all of them want to inform you that Jesus isn't really God.
Yes, that's another message. Or there's some kind of anti-Christian message that will come along with that. Just like it's in the, I recently did a program on channeling. It's the same thing. In the channeled materials, you find the same thing. There's always going to be an anti-Christian bias. And it's the same thing with these supposed messages from aliens, however they're coming. So it's the same, it's always the same from these sources,
More and more groups really want to have credibility by, attaching Jesus to what they are teaching and even appealing to the Bible. But, the problem is the Bible kind of refutes oftentimes what it is that they're saying. So we have a sponsor that addresses that issue.
Oh.
We all know that awkward feeling when somebody or someone in a Bible study says, I wish the Bible didn't have all these verses about hell. Or when you're having a couple's devotions and your spouse says, I'm just not comfortable with verses that teach a traditional view of marriage. Or when you're sitting in a church and you're thinking, why do all the Bibles I read always have to agree with what conservative pastors are teaching? Well, that's why we're introducing My Bible. It's guaranteed the most comfortable Bible you'll ever own. We've spent literally minutes creating a way you can have the Bible perfect for you. You used to have to go down some dark alley to get a Bible like this, but not anymore. Just write down all the places where you want to make your Bible more comfortable for you, and then email them to us or enter them into our handy online form. And the results speak for themselves. Yolanda from Portland says, now that I have my Bible, I never worried that my white male pastor's sermons might actually be right. Ben from seminary says, my Bible gave me the confidence I needed to drop out of my Hebrew and Greek classes. Renee from Madison said, every single one of my anti-capitalist, anti-police, and anti-social protest chants now comes from my Bible. And Buck50 from Brooklyn says, since I got my Bible, I have no trouble basing my violent and misogynistic lyrics on scripture. So when someone throws an uncomfortable verse at you, you can say, that's not in my Bible. Get one at mybible.cult. So, I'd like to get back to something we were talking about earlier, because I have a feeling that a lot of we go through this every year. It begins right before Halloween, and you see it on Christian Facebook groups. You see it in Twitter accounts where it begins with Halloween, then it proceeds to Christmas, and how people are saying paganism has invaded the church, and these are evidences of it. And I'd like to point out, as far as I know, every single one of these is basically a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
In other words, there's some, and they even approach it the way a typical conspiracy theorist does. There's something you don't know. There's something you haven't been told. Your pastor isn't telling you this. Your Sunday school teacher isn't telling you this, but it's there. There's this conspiracy to fool you, to trick you into doing things that are evil and nasty. And Satan is co-opting the whole church this way. Right around the time Mike Warnke came out with,
Satan Seller.
Popular. He came out with his book, and he had a record. He had a couple of record albums. Jack Chick, we mentioned him earlier. He's like the granddaddy of conspiracy theorists. He came out with this comic called The Broken Cross, and it featured a guy. Basically, all of these conspiracy theory comic books. He was getting into the large format. He had those little comic tracks through the 60s and 70s. Well, he started publishing these regular size comic books, and this one's called The Broken Cross. And the template was the same. You start with some story that he works up on his comics. In this case, the cop is saying, don't tell anyone what you've seen. Why is he saying that? Because this guy just saw actual police officers engaged in a satanic ritual. So that's how evil this conspiracy is. It's even the police are part of it. Yeah. And after you go through this initial premise of this story, you're introduced to a guy named John Todd. Now, John Todd was an actual guy out there who was like Mike Warnke, going from church to church, claiming to have been a Satanist. He was claiming to be a Druid high priest. He was claiming all these things. This was the 70s. I listened to a cassette tape that was being circulated in churches in which they kept asking him, who is the Antichrist? Because he claimed to know who it was. He said, we've already positioned him. We've already got him out there. He's already on the world stage, ready to be revealed. Well, who is he? In this one tape I listened to, he says, okay, I'll tell you, but you won't believe me, but I'll tell you who it is. Who is it? Jimmy Carter.
Oh my gosh.
That's what he was saying. He was the Antichrist, according to John Todd. Well, John Todd was later convicted of rape and did prison time, and now he's dead. There's in another comic series called, it was based on the life of a Jesuit priest named Alberto Rivera.
Alberto Rivera, right.
The same kind of thing happens. You've got this story at the beginning of this great conspiracy involving the Catholic Church this time, because Alberto claims to have been a former Jesuit. And then you had another comic book with a different conspiracy. I actually called the Chino, California headquarters of Chick Tracks, Chick Publications, and talked to, the only person I could talk to was the lady who answered the phone, and she was very well versed in this stuff. And I said, look, you've got this comic book that says it's all about the Illuminati. You've got this other comic book that says it's all about the Jesuits. You got this other comic book that says it's all about witchcraft. Which conspiracy is it? And she goes, they're all interconnected.
Right.
They all reinforce each other. It's like, but we haven't seen evidence of any of them except for these characters. Now, Alberto, I think he was exposed later. Yeah, I know he was exposed. I'm just trying to remember exactly when. He had forged checks in Puerto Rico. He went by 3 or 4 different names. He's also passed away too. So I can almost guarantee if you are listening to somebody who is telling you that Christmas is pagan, that you've been duped into celebrating it, that Halloween is pagan, that you've been duped, that you can probably trace it back to one of these very, very dubious
Right.
sources.
I want to pick up on that because we have people who are just absolutely intent on saying if you celebrate Halloween in any way, you are supporting Satanism or something like that. And again, if you don't celebrate Halloween, that's fine. Make your choices. But at least be accurate about what it is that you're claiming. These conspiracy theories, I want to double down on that one because we watched that develop into the satanic panic of the 80s and 90s. The result of which was we had Christian clinics, quote unquote,
Right.
advocating and believing that we had this big problem with Satanism in the church where pastors and their wives are sacrificing babies on the altars in Roman Catholic. No, they're not married, but Roman Catholic churches, in the basements of Baptist churches. And in fact, at one point, because this became an issue for Joy, she was very concerned about the false memory syndrome, these accusations of recovered memories of all his evil goings on. And we were at a picnic at a church that we're associated with. And sitting next to Joy was this woman that we had never met before, wasn't part of our church. She just came as a friend of somebody else, who was a counselor. And what is her specialty? Satanic ritual abuse, recovered memories. And Joy went, oh, this is God's sense of humor. And so as they were talking and she discovered it, she said, so how do you know that this is going on? And so she's described all the memories and stuff. She goes, okay, but, do you have like evidence, actual, like the Perry Mason stuff, bones, for example? Oh, no actual evidence. Why is that? Well, because the police are involved. The detectives are involved. Judges are involved. Governors are involved. And they hide all of this information because the satanic covens go all the way through all levels of the government.
Sounds legit to me.
Yeah, it doesn't really work. They destroyed a lot of lives and churches.
People went to prison in some cases.
People went to prison in some cases.
Things are actually, Christians need to realize these conspiracy theories, which I have taken a stand against for many years, actually do damage people. They actually are damaging. First of all, they're damaging you if you believe them because you're believing falsehoods. But secondly, they can lead to damaging people. They can lead to people being actually harmed or their reputations harmed. And, and now with the internet, it's even worse than the Jack Chick tracks because now everyone has access to all this stuff. They don't have to go get a track from Jack Chick. And you've got all these conspiracy theories online with these horrible, sensational tales, and people believe them. I mean, I know because I interact with them in my ministry, and I don't allow them to post anything on my pages that is coming from a conspiracy theory or that supports conspiracy theory. I just don't allow it. And I consider conspiracy theories a big deception from Satan. Ironically, that what is really satanic is a conspiracy theory, not what the conspiracy theory is saying. So it's like like very sneaky deception.
The only thing more gullible and the only thing easier to manipulate than a group of people is a bigger group of people. This is no exaggeration. How many you remember the McMartin preschool scandal? Or panic hysteria? Right. We believe the children. The one district attorney, I believe, manipulated a whole city and even a nation into believing that children had been molested when they hadn't been molested. It was a lie. It ruined a preschool. It ruined the lives of the operators and the owners. And that was not the only time it happened. It became almost a regular event. First it started with McMartin, then it was some other preschool, then it was another. It's like, is every preschool out there molesting children? It turned out that none of them were.
Right. And the story's passion is reaching Jehovah's Witnesses. This one became her second passion because of the destruction it was wreaking in the church, where fathers are being accused by their daughters of terrible things, only to discover none of these accusations were true. They came at the hands of a counselor who persuaded them. They had repressed memories from the earliest years of whenever. And you listen to the story of the McMartin case is a perfect example. And as they're talking with the kids, they persuaded them eventually to start telling these stories. They have the McMartins taking sharks. They said they owned sharks. They had a special shark tank and a special shark truck and drove them to the lake and threw the sharks in the lake and then threw the kids in the lake. And then afterwards, they brought the kids out safe and sound, obviously, and brought the sharks out and drove all the way back. And none of the parents ever knew this was happening. Or they would take trips to the moon in a balloon, no less, and back during the day and do things on the moon. And they're listening to all this stuff, and it goes to court, and the jury finds them guilty, not because of any evidence. They said, we knew none of that evidence is true, but we knew something had to be going on.
Right. Yeah, it's like, somebody's lying about them. That's what's going on.
Right.
It is actually amazing. History is replete. History is literally stuffed with examples of this kind of thing, where mobs are whipped into a frenzy. I don't want to get political here, but, they say that the founding fathers were afraid of democracy because in their minds, they associated it with mob rule. Where did they get that? They got it from history going all the way back to Plato. Plato was very anti-democratic because it was his experience. In his experience, he presents historical examples from the Athenian history of what happened under the democracy of Athens. And it was easy to whip up a mob. It was easy to get them hysterical. Right. For some reason, groups of people are more gullible and easy. I can name reasons why. When you're in a group, it's risky to oppose the person who has the ear of everybody else. Right. It's risk. You will be. And we see this happening on social media all the time. If you challenge the dominant social paradigm, you become a target. They go after you, even if you have all the facts on your side.
Right. That's very true.
So this is one of the reasons out of several why mobs are gullible. Mobs are easy to assemble, easy to manipulate, easy to control. And so, we are seeing this on social media today. We saw it only 25 or less than about 30 years ago with the McMartin preschool. Right. Nobody learns the lesson. Nobody studies history. Even history that happened in their own lifetime, people don't pay attention to. So
here's some interesting things, Joy, because this, like I said, this became a passion of Joy. She's got tons of books we've written on this topic. And one of the things we watched was this study they had done where they took, like a 8-year-old boy or something, and he had been in the basement with his father working on a furnace and whatever. Well, then later they said, okay, now when you were with your father and you broke your arm, well, he didn't break his arm. And so he said, well, I didn't break my arm. Well, then a little while later they asked him again, well, okay, when you were with your father, what was it you were doing when you broke your arm? Well, I don't think I broke my arm, he says. After several attempts at that, he finally got the idea that they wanted him to say he broke his arm. Then he created this elaborate story about how he broke his arm. Okay, so now this is embedded. He's telling the story. A few days later, they come back to him to tell him that he never really broke his arm. You know what happened? He defended his story that he broke his arm because he came to believe the story was true, even though everyone knew it was fake. None of it was true, but he now believed it. Memory is not always a good resource for those kinds of things, because you can be persuaded to believe things that are untrue.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could be persuaded to believe you saw something you didn't.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, it's they used to say for when you have 3 witnesses to any event, especially like a crime, you'll have 3 different accounts of that event. Well, now we will say when there are 3 witnesses, you actually have 4 accounts, because the 4th account is now the surveillance camera, which totally disagrees with the other 3, or it differs in many details from the other 3 witnesses. It's just amazing how human memories are malleable, how they don't have the focus.
Well, and even when you have the camera, you don't really have all of the story, because what is going on off camera, what happened pre this segment, and what happened after that. So there's other elements that it's like the story Kenneth Conser, who was the head of the evangelical free denomination for a while, tells a story about his friend had received a phone call about the girl, about the daughter of a friend of theirs, that said, "Did you hear about so and so? She was on a sidewalk and was stepping off the sidewalk and was struck by a car. Not dead, but injured." Okay. A little while later, they got another call. Same girl. "Did you hear that so and so was in a car and was hit by a truck and killed immediately?" And you go, those are contradictory. But as you start delving into what actually happened, she was on a corner, on a curb, stepping off. A car came up to the stoplight, hit her in the leg, injured her. He immediately tried to get her into the car, was rushing her to the hospital. As he was crossing an intersection, a dump truck ran through the red light, ran into the car, killed them both instantly. All of the facts have to be in place in order to know the whole story.
Yeah. And so it sounds contradictory at first. It sounds like parallel accounts in the Gospels that some people say contradict each other, but actually complement each other. But there have been cases in which there were shootings and people swore that they saw the shooting take place. They swore that they actually saw, and yet the surveillance cameras that caught the action proved that they couldn't possibly have seen it. There were just too many obstructions in their way. They thought they saw it. They heard the shots. They saw people running, and later they actually swore that they saw it, but they didn't.
All right. That's because the power of suggestion too. The power of suggestion is very strong, and that's how hypnotism works. That's how a lot of people are persuaded to believe things that they normally wouldn't believe, or think that they saw things they didn't see. And it's all that we're very vulnerable to the power of suggestion, and that's why we have to really double check things. We have to look for evidence. We have to look for facts. Don't believe things you read on the internet about Halloween that don't give a backup or basis or evidence for it. And especially these wild things like people are sacrificing babies or something on Halloween, which is just ridiculous.
And be very careful.
Believing this wild stuff it's carnal. It's actually carnal. It stirs up the flesh, and it stirs up this sensationalistic, fleshly thing in us that some people find an enjoyment with it. Or a satisfaction in it. And that's what draws people to these sensational stories. And we really need to, that's not a biblical response. So,
So here's kind of our takeaway as we're getting ready to wrap up here is, yes, our theme is Halloween, but it's a bigger question. And that is the question of, how do we know what is true? We need to have, as Marcia said, facts and evidence. God gave us, in fact, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. You have to be intellectually engaged in these issues. More damage is done within the church by those who believe false things to other believers and to non-believers as well. We lose a hearing with non-believers when we falsely accuse them of things they are not doing. So that's critically important. I can't emphasize that enough. When I have a PR person for a Wiccan covenant saying, I would become a Christian if I thought you guys represented that, but I think you're an anomaly, that's a problem for the church.
Yeah.
So, and with that, Ron, would you dance us out of here?
You want to? So you don't want me to walk us out? You want me to
No,
dance?
I want to dance.
Okay, our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Our culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D Opposer. Our Mormon archives manager is Polygamous. Our liberal denomination bureau chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Our special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys is Ode to Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Your Leg Pulling. Our technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Ivana Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is Wiretapping, and original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, but you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happen. Never, never.
Oops, sorry.
All right. Marcia and Ron, say goodbye to everybody, and we will see you all next
Goodbye.
week.
Hasta la vista, baby.